then they're in violation of the law.
Violating the law. Is the law in the room with us right now, Donald? Because Congress hasn't passed one. Up next, we've got to check in with Trump and the economy, because President Trump is making some really big waves right now. He just kind of shocked everyone with an announcement he put out, caught everyone off guard, has finance bros everywhere and bankers really worried, and also just people who are trying to follow the policy world confused, to say the least. But he put out an announcement that he will be, or he says he is, but he's actually not, we'll get into it, implementing a 10% interest rate cap on credit cards. Here is CNBC reporting on this story. Let's listen.
President Trump says if credit card companies don't lower their interest rates to 10% by next week, they'll be violating the law. On Friday, the president posted on Truth Social that he was calling for a one-year cap on rates, saying that the public has been ripped off by credit card companies. It's unclear what laws they would be violating if they don't comply. Groups including the Bank Policy Institute, the American Bankers Association, and the Independent Community Bankers of America issued a joint statement saying a 10% cap on interest rates would reduce credit availability and be, in their words, devastating for millions of American families and small business owners.
Because they're not going to give them.
Well, this is something I've never really understood. How do credit card... I mean, I figure you ought to let them charge whatever. It's a free market, right? But how is it that when rates are so low, you do see some credit card companies at like 20% plus? What is the... Is it because of the risk you're taking on in certain parts of the population or something?
So I was on the phone with a bunch of bankers over the weekend who were basically not just mad,
just flipping
out of their minds, frankly. Yeah. And they were flipping out of their minds, I believe. And the argument they were making is, if you don't want credit in America, if you want us to shut down, millions of people's credit cards, because that's what we will have to do to make the economics of these businesses work.
So I'm going to get into my thoughts on this, but I just want to read you the official social media posts from the White House's account on social media. This is from X. Huge. President Donald J. Trump announces a one-year cap on credit card interest rates of 10% effective January 20, 2026. Then they share a post that has a Trump Truth Social post that says, please be informed that we will no longer let the American public be ripped off by credit card companies that are charging interest rates of 20 to 30% and even more, which festered unimpeded during the sleepy Joe Biden administration. Affordability! Exclamation mark. Effective January 20, 2026. I, as President of the United States, am calling for a one-year cap on credit card interest rates of 10%. Coincidentally, the January 20th date will coincide with the one-year anniversary of the historic and very successful Trump administration. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. President Donald J. Trump. Love the thank you for your attention to this matter. That's always a nice touch. I actually low-key do find that funny. But I have one question that immediately pops out. Did I miss the part where he passed a law about this? Did that happen and I just didn't notice it? They got Congress together. They passed a law with because laws have been proposed about this. Ironically, Bernie Sanders in 2019 proposed a law instituting a 15% cap on credit card interest rates. Donald Trump said, hold my beer. My price controls are going to be stricter than the socialist senator's price controls, because what we're talking about here is a price control. And it's funny because Republicans, when Kamala Harris discussed doing price controls on things like groceries and other things, they screamed bloody murder. They were like, Kamala, price controls never work. They always fail. They always have unintended consequences. And they were right to do so. I did the same. But a interest rate cap is simply a price control on the price of money, on the price that you can charge to loan someone money. And I guess I am not particularly invested in people having access to credit cards with credit scores below like 700. But the effect of actually doing this would be that credit card companies would stop offering credit to large swaths of the public. The reason they charge 20 to 30% for these folks, so the way you should be using a credit card is paying it off fully, and then the interest rate is like 0. But it is because that the risk involved in giving these people money that they may or may not pay back. They might run up big balances. And so if you set a maximum rate they can charge that is below the cost benefit ratio of giving them the money, they're just not going to extend credit to those people. And so if that's what you want to do, okay, I guess. I mean, people are going to be unhappy about that. A lot of people, it's probably going to depress consumer spending, which might not be great for the economy, but okay. But I think what you should do, though, is if you're pushing this kind of policy, be honest and say, we want to ban credit cards for 2/3 of the country. Don't say, oh, we're going to make them provide low interest credit to you. They're not going to do it. They don't have to do it, and you can't force them to act against basic profit incentive. And so the effect would be that most people will have their credit cards canceled, and credit cards will only be offered to people with very good credit ratings who it's profitable or safe for these companies to offer a 10% credit card rate. But I feel like we've lost the plot even discussing this, because again, Trump is just acting like he did a policy that he didn't do. He didn't even do an executive order about it. So more than anything, I'm just confused. What does he think is happening? Because listen to this clip where he was asked about it. He seems to think that he has actually enacted some kind of policy, not just called for it, which I guess he's free to do, but Congress still has to pass a bill. Or he hasn't even tried to do it via executive order, which he couldn't do, but he could try, I guess. Here's a clip of him being asked about this, I believe on Air Force One. Let's listen.
What happens if the credit card companies don't comply by the January date?
Well, then they're in violation of the law.
And you have thresholds
Very
for-
severe things. No, I want a cap on credit card interest rates because, some of them are 28, almost 30%. And people don't know they're paying 30%. The people out there, they're working and they have no idea that they're paying 30%. No way. We're putting a 1-year cap at 10%, and that's it. They know it. They've really abused the public. The credit card companies have totally abused it. I'm not going to let it happen.
So what the hell is going on? Does he think that a law has been passed because it hasn't been? Or does he think that he's a king and he can just make pronouncements and then they become a law? Because that's not how it works, Donald. And you truth socialing or saying here that companies have to do it or they're violating the law. Is the law in the room with us right now, Donald? Because Congress hasn't passed one. You haven't even issued an executive order. A tweet is not a law, and you can't just rule by fiat and declare these things the law of the land. So somebody needs to help this man get a grip because he is, I don't know, totally out of touch with reality on this one. If you want to enact this policy, you must support, and there have been bills introduced by some Republicans even, to enact this kind of policy through Congress. You must pass a law. It's like, do I need to get the Schoolhouse Rock thing out for you, Donald? This isn't how this works. You can't just demand companies do something and then call your demands the law. That's not how a presidency works in a constitutional republic with divided, separated powers and checks and balances. Now, I think this is a bad policy. I think it would just result in more people going to payday loans and loan sharks and getting their legs broken or other, like these kinds of things have unintended consequences. But sure, it's a policy you can pursue in a democratic society, but you can't just declare it the law of the land. That's why I find this so bizarre and so disturbing, because it represents a break from the basic political process that either he has lost touch with what's happening and thinks things have happened that haven't, or he is saying he doesn't need to do them. He doesn't need to go through the order. That would be even more, actually, either way, it's kind of concerning. Because in one way, then we got somebody suffering from a bout of delulu in the Oval Office. And I thought we were over that when Joe Biden went back to licking ice cream, right? Or we have somebody who's just breaking the rules and doesn't care about our constitutional order. Either way, that's not good. And it's a much bigger deal than a dumb credit card policy that would like destroy credit card points and maybe bankrupt some airlines and maybe depress consumer spending and hurt the economy and maybe push more people to get payday loans and other even more exploitative options. I care about that, but that's not like the big issue here. the big issue here is this break from reality from Trump or this break from process and our constitutional order. Either way, there's something about this story that is very strange and doesn't sit right with me, beyond just me disagreeing with the policy. Because, okay, I disagree with most policies that happen in Washington, right? So that's my kind of thought on this. And the one other thing I will say is it is a dividing line at some level of who gets to decide is an important question when it comes to political and policy decisions. And do I think credit card companies are ethical and decent and good? No, probably not. I think a lot of them are probably shitty. Do I think some people get in really bad situations with credit card debt? Yes. Do I think that ultimately you should be able to decide whether or not you use a credit card with a 20% interest rate? Or do I think the government should make that decision for you about your personal finances? I generally start from the belief that people should be the masters of their own lives and adults should make their own decisions, and that the government superimposing its one-size-fits-all judgment is not a good fit for everyone and is not the proper role of the state. But even if you disagree with me, which is fine, that's always welcome here, even if you think these credit card companies are out of control, we do need some interest rate caps, I would hope you would agree with me that you can't just have presidents declaring shit as the law of the land and just breaking the process and trying to enact their will via fiat. Because that's no longer about credit cards. It's about something much more important. So that's why I find this story important and concerning. But you guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments. I want to hear from you for sure. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet.